So just remember that. Now we're going to talk about what makes a person a bad person. How can you tell when someone is a bad person in terms of how are you able to tell when somebody is, enticing you or leading you down a path that is not good? Because ultimately, going back to the wicked woman, um, it's that, yeah, for her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go to her return again, neither take they hold of the paths of life. Excuse me. So a lot of these statements that are made in the Bible are made as metaphors and analogies. So it's not necessarily as black and white and abrupt as, was it? No, it wasn't Jack and Jill. What's the story with the kids and they go to the gingerbread house and it turns out that the gingerbread house, there's a witch in it, and then she wants to eat the kids. I don't remember if she eats the kids, but going, to the house of an evil woman, for example, we're going to focus on that because we're girls, or they them, so we're whoever is watching this video. But as a girl, I'm going to talk about the girl stuff more. So it's not necessarily just that you're going to go to an evil woman's house and then you're going to die. It's not like it's a metaphor for choosing the path that you choose in your life. And that is a metaphor that is continuously mentioned and discussed in the Bible, where there's a lot of discussion of the path of God. And this is a concept that is pretty consistent among different holy scriptures and all different religions, where you're walking in the way of God or you're not walking in the way of God, right? And so it's not like you're literally just going to somebody's house one night and then you're going to die. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes in life, there are terrible accidents and stuff like that, but that is very, very rare. It's more about understanding that when you choose to do what bad people are doing, when you choose to follow the paths of bad people, you are going to, at some point, like, you're going to reach the end of the line. And even if it's just the way that we live our lives, even if you live like a long life, when you die and that's the end of your path, again, this is where the concept of heaven and hell comes in, but also it's really important, and it's interesting to remember and to recognize that, again, the concept of heaven and hell, it's not just like cloud in the sky versus fire and brimstone. And there's also so much recognition in the Bible in terms of God's grace, which is just forgiving yourself, right? That making bad choices does not mean that you are just done for the rest of your life. It's making the choice consistently to do bad stuff, even when you know better, and not turning your path around. That is where you're going to end up at the end of your life, and you're going to be really unhappy with where you are, because it's just, whether or not it's karma, whether or not it is just basic common sense, right? If you end up in a situation where you've only associated with bad people, those aren't going to be people that you can rely on. So realistically, you're going to end up dying alone, right? Or you might alienate all of your loved ones, and you won't end up in a situation where they're part of your lives when you pass away and you didn't get to have a positive impact on your loved ones or their lives. Or maybe you ended up enticed down that path and you ended up addicted to drugs. And again, I am officially, clinically, a recovered or recovering drug addict. And that was honestly very surprising to me when I found that out, because I didn't realize how much that could have messed up my life. Or, like, for example, really the main thing, I guess, was the benzos, was the Zans. And I found this out when I was doing a trauma diagnosis with like a psychiatrist in the fall of 2023. And at the end of it, I ended up being undiagnosed with bipolar 1, which was very jarring because I had been misdiagnosed with bipolar 1. And that's a really scary thing to be misdiagnosed with because your perception of reality is basically viewed as not real, and you can have your adult rights taken away from you. And I experienced some very scary situations because of that, where I was very vulnerable. But at the end of that, I found out I didn't have bipolar 1, but I did find out that because I basically had to say like every single thing I'd ever done. Took like 2 months, excuse me. I did find out that I was a recovering, and I would clinically always be in recovery. I'm sober. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. Drug addict, specifically benzos. And the psychiatrist was so confused as to and concerned because he was like, so this was in 2017 that I had what I thought was my Xanax phase, but guess that was active drug addiction. Where he was like, how did you come off of those by yourself? How did you manage the withdrawals? Because it's really unsafe to just withdraw from benzodiazepines, I don't know, without medical supervision, and it's really unsafe cold turkey. How were you? Did you not? And I was like, oh, so that explained like all of the like projectile vomiting and stuff like that. I had no idea. Like in retrospect, I was like, yeah, that was absolutely withdrawal. I had no idea when I did Xanax for the first time that withdrawal for Xanax could be potentially fatal. This is a really good example in terms of paths leading to death and stuff. When it comes to hard drugs, when it comes to prescription drugs, when it comes to any form of drugs, what you do not realize most of the time when you decide to take them, because you're like, oh, it's not a big deal. Or I find that what a lot of people, because I know a few people that have experimented with drugs, have ended up in active addiction. It's not that they didn't think that the drug was hard. It was that they didn't think that active addiction would happen to them, if that makes sense. And that is a really good example or a different example, quetiapine. So I still take quetiapine in the evenings. It is technically an antipsychotic, and I was prescribed it when I was misdiagnosed with bipolar 1. And so I've been on it ever since. And actually, when I found out that I didn't have bipolar 1, I was like, it's okay if I do. I'm getting the best sleeps of my life. Please don't make me stop taking this. And then that's when the psychiatrist was like, okay, yeah, but the view that you have towards drugs is not good. And I was like, oh, but quetiapine. So I didn't have a choice in going on it. I was basically smacked out of my mind on these antipsychotics for 3 weeks, a month. It was terrifying. It was really terrifying. At the time in spring, summer 2022, it was terrifying. But again, best sleeps of my life until I slept over at a friend's house in January. And I forgot my quetiapine because I was snowed in. There was a really big snowstorm. And that night, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Quetiapine, basically you take it when you go to bed, and then half an hour, you're like, so, but I just, I thought that I'd still be able to sleep, and I wasn't able to sleep at all, regardless of how tired I was. I started experiencing super duper hardcore cold sweats, chills. I was like it was like I was shaking and stuff like that. And I was like, what is happening? And I looked it up, and quetiapine, you start going through withdrawals within 12 hours if you stop taking it, and you cannot go off of quetiapine cold turkey. You have to, like, I'm still on it. I don't care. Again, best sleeps of my life, but it was really jarring. And that's a really good example in terms of drugs, where it's really important to not, like, don't even go down those paths, because of the fact that Everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them until it does. 100%. And also, again, drugs is a perfect example, but in terms of a lot of things that will lead you down a bad path in life, even just in terms of having a negative mindset or being really selfish and stuff like that, you think that you can just stop and pivot, right? But a lot of the time, you don't realize how hard it is to get off of that path, right? And that's why, a lot of drug addicts, they relapse or they're not able to get off of the drugs that they're on because of the fact that if they don't have enough help and enough support around them, because like Xanax was bad enough, but like things like, heroin and everything, you have to have supervised withdrawal because the withdrawal itself can kill you. So drugs, great example. Drugs are bad. No, but they honestly they are. I'm saying this as somebody that has done a lot of drugs. I grew up downtown Toronto. I It's not worth it. They're just like you don't feel that great even. They're not worth it. Like it's not worth it.